Hey everyone, and welcome back. We are diving into a classic today,
Oh, yeah, a huge one.
How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
A classic.
And what's really interesting is we're looking at a 1956 pocket edition,
Okay.
53rd printing of this book.
Wow.
So clearly it's had a big impact over the years. And so I think, our mission today is to unearth those timeless principles that Carnegie lays out
Mm-hmm.
and see how they apply to you in your life today.
Yeah. And what I think is so fascinating about this book is that it's not just something that was dreamed up in a, ivory tower somewhere.
Yeah,
It really comes from real life experience.
it does.
Yeah.
Carnegie actually developed this material while teaching adults.
Right.
So back in 1936, he had over 2,500 people
Wow.
in his Effective Speaking and Human Relations course in New York City.
That's a lot of people.
And here's the thing. They weren't all aspiring speakers or politicians.
Right.
I mean, you had bakers, you had presidents, you had secretaries,
What a diverse group.
even a chemical salesman from Indianapolis,
Wow.
all in one room.
Yeah. So what brought them all together?
That is the question.
I mean, what was the common thread?
They all wanted to improve their lives,
Okay.
and specifically when it came to dealing with other people.
I see. So it speaks to the sort of basic human need
Yeah,
to connect with others.
Right.
And, kind of navigate the complexities of relationships.
totally.
Which is something that's relevant, across time and professions, really.
For sure. And, it's interesting to think about Carnegie's own path, too.
Yeah.
He started as a struggling student.
Mm-hmm.
He even worked on a farm for a bit before finding success as a salesman and a teacher.
Yeah.
And his own journey is a testament to how powerful these principles can be
I mean, it's very inspiring.
when you actually apply them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what makes it so relatable, I think. And,
Mhm.
his personal transformation is sort of woven into the very fabric of the book.
Right.
It makes it a practical guide rather than just, some theoretical concept.
Absolutely. So let's get into one of the most powerful ideas in the book.
Okay.
You can't win an argument.
Oh, that's a good one.
And to illustrate this, Carnegie tells this great story about having dinner with Sir Ross Smith,
Okay.
the famous Australian aviator.
Oh, yeah.
And they get into this debate about a quote.
Mm-hmm.
And Carnegie was absolutely sure he was right.
Right.
Like completely convinced.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, he argued vehemently.
Oh, no.
And guess what?
But
He was wrong.
oh,
Even though he realized his mistake, the damage was done.
I see.
The relationship felt strained.
Yeah, it's a perfect illustration of how sometimes winning an argument can actually cost you the relationship.
Yeah, for sure.
It makes you wonder,
Mm,
what's the point of winning if you lose the connection in the process?
exact.
And I think Carnegie realized that forcing your opinion on someone,
Right.
even if you're right, often creates resentment and it pushes people away.
It's true. And he really drives this point home with the story of Patrick J. O'Hare,
Okay.
a salesman who was struggling.
Uh-huh.
And he learned to stop arguing with customers
Okay.
and instead really listen to their needs.
So it's a simple shift in mindset,
Mm-hmm.
but the results were dramatic.
Yeah.
His sales skyrocketed
Crazy.
just by focusing on understanding instead of arguing.
Right. It makes you think.
Yeah.
How often do we get caught up in trying to prove our point?
Mm-hmm.
And what would happen if we focused on understanding the other person's perspective instead,
Right.
even if we don't agree with it?
It's a challenge worth considering.
Absolutely.
Shifting our focus from winning to understanding can have a profound impact on our relationships.
So true. So let's shift gears to another core concept,
Okay.
the universal desire to feel important.
Oh, that's a big one.
And Carnegie explores this through some really interesting figures.
Okay, like who?
Well, from criminals like Two Gun Crowley
Wow.
and Al Capone
Interesting.
to even President Taft. Really?
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it is, to see how this desire for importance manifests across such a diverse range of individuals.
Right.
I mean, even those who defy societal norms are often driven by this need for significance,
Right.
albeit in, maybe a distorted way.
Yeah. And he contrasts figures like John D. Rockefeller
Uh-huh.
and John Dillinger.
Okay.
Both sought importance, but their approaches were vastly different.
Yeah, how so?
Well, Rockefeller, despite his flaws, understood the power of making people feel valued.
Mm,
He invested in his employees,
right.
appreciated their contributions, and cultivated loyalty.
Yeah.
And then you have Charles Schwab, the steel magnate,
Yep.
who believed that genuine appreciation, not just flattery,
Right.
was the key to unlocking people's potential
Interesting.
and achieving success.
So it wasn't about manipulation,
No.
but about recognizing and valuing each individual's contribution.
Right. And this raises an important question for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Are we making the people around us feel important?
Yeah. How are we showing genuine appreciation for others?
Good question.
It's not about showering people with empty praise.
Right.
It's about acknowledging their efforts,
Yeah.
recognizing their strengths, and making them feel seen and valued for who they are.
And that's where the power of sincerity comes in.
Right.
True appreciation can't be faked.
No.
It must come from a place of genuine respect and understanding.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So these principles,
Yeah.
being genuinely interested in others,
Mm-hmm.
listening attentively, encouraging them to talk about themselves,
Yeah.
and making them feel important sincerely,
Right.
form the foundation of Carnegie's philosophy.
They really do.
But there's so much more to unpack.
I know, right?
What's resonating with you so far?
I mean, a lot.
What stands out?
I think before we jump into the next layer,
Okay.
let's just pause for a moment
Yeah.
and let these ideas sink in.
Yeah. Let's take a moment to reflect.
Mm-hmm.
Think about how these principles connect to your own experiences,
Yeah.
because real transformation happens
Right.
when we move beyond simply knowing
Mm-hmm.
to actually applying these ideas in our daily lives.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this deep dive so valuable.
Right.
We're not just aiming for an intellectual understanding of Carnegie's work.
Right.
We're looking for practical takeaways that you can use right away
Yeah.
to build stronger relationships, to influence others positively, and ultimately to live a more fulfilling life.
That's it.
And I think,
Exactly. We'll get into it
yeah, let's continue.
more soon.
Yeah.
So we were just talking about this idea of making others feel important.
Yeah.
And it really is a powerful motivator.
It is.
And Carnegie points out that it can be used for good or for bad.
Oh, absolutely. And he uses some pretty striking examples to make that point.
Right.
Like, take Two-Gun Crowley,
Okay.
the notorious gangster.
Yeah.
Even when he was cornered by police,
Right.
about to be taken down,
Wow.
he still saw himself as the victim.
It's crazy, right?
He believed his actions were justified.
It's wild to think that
It is.
even when someone's clearly in the wrong,
Mm.
they can twist things around to protect their ego
Yeah.
and feel powerful.
It speaks to a fundamental aspect of human psychology, I think.
Right.
We have this inherent need to
Yeah.
maintain a sense of self-worth,
Uh-huh.
even when our actions contradict it.
Totally. And it's not limited to criminals either.
Oh, no, not at all.
Even President Taft, a respected leader,
Right.
craved that validation.
Mm.
In his memoirs, he talks about how deeply criticism stung.
Wow.
How much he wanted to be seen as capable and intelligent.
It shows that this need for appreciation,
Yeah.
for having our opinions and contributions matter,
Mm-hmm.
is something we all share,
Right.
regardless of our background or status.
Totally. And that's where things get really interesting.
Well,
Because once you understand this human drive,
yeah,
you can start to use it in a positive way.
exactly. That's where Carnegie's principles about winning people to your way of thinking come in. It's not about manipulating or coercing,
Right.
but about truly understanding and respecting the other person's perspective,
Okay.
making them feel heard and valued.
So it's less about forcing our own opinions
Yeah.
and more about creating a space where we can connect and understand each other.
Precisely. Carnegie argues that the most effective way to influence someone
Okay.
is to genuinely try to understand their viewpoint first.
Makes sense.
He even says, and I quote, "If there is any one secret of success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from his angle as well as from your own."
Powerful stuff. And he illustrates this with, real life examples.
Mm-hmm.
Like the story about a man trying to negotiate a rent increase with his landlord.
Oh, yeah.
And he was ready to fight tooth and nail for every penny.
I've been there.
Right.
But then he had this realization,
What's that?
why don't I try to understand my landlord's perspective?
Interesting.
So instead of arguing,
Yeah.
he focused on explaining how the increase would benefit the landlord.
Smart. And you know what?
What?
It worked.
No way.
He didn't get the full amount he initially wanted,
Okay.
but he got a significant increase.
Wow.
And he did it without creating any bad blood.
That's a win-win.
It is a perfect example of how empathy and understanding
Right.
can lead to that win-win situation.
I love that.
Carnegie also talks about never telling someone they're wrong,
Ugh.
even if they are.
That sounds counterintuitive.
It does, right?
Yeah.
But he's not saying to avoid healthy debate
Right.
or to condone misinformation.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that directly confronting someone,
Mm-hmm.
especially in public, rarely changes their mind.
Yeah, it usually just makes them defensive.
And Carnegie shares an anecdote about a man who argued with a friend about a quote.
Okay.
And he was convinced he was right,
Uh-huh.
but later found out he was wrong the entire time.
Oh, man, imagine how that man must have felt.
Yeah.
Not only was he wrong,
Right.
but he dug himself into a hole by arguing so vehemently. It's a humbling experience.
It really highlights that directly telling someone they're wrong
Yeah.
often backfires.
Right.
It makes them feel embarrassed and resentful,
Yeah.
which doesn't help build relationships or influence anyone positively.
So what's the alternative?
Well, Carnegie suggests a gentler approach.
Okay, I like it.
Instead of saying you're wrong, ask questions
Uh-huh.
that subtly guide the person to see things from a different angle.
I see.
Like saying, that's an interesting point. Have you considered this other perspective?
Okay.
It's about respecting their opinion,
Right.
even if you disagree, and creating that safe space for open discussion.
Exactly. It's about building bridges, not burning them.
I love that. And this leads to another important principle,
Okay, what's that?
admitting when you're wrong.
Ooh, that can be tough.
It can be tough for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Admitting fault can feel like a sign of weakness.
But Carnegie argues it's actually a sign of strength.
Interesting.
He believes that admitting your mistakes quickly and sincerely can disarm your opponent. Okay.
And make them more receptive to your viewpoint.
Think about it.
Yeah.
When someone refuses to admit they're wrong,
Yeah.
even when the evidence is clear,
Right.
it makes us question their judgment and credibility.
It does.
But when someone readily acknowledges their errors, it shows humility, self-awareness,
Right.
and a willingness to learn.
I like it.
And those qualities build trust and respect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It completely changes the dynamic.
Yeah.
They're expecting an argument,
Right.
and suddenly you're agreeing with them,
Hmm.
taking responsibility for your part.
Right.
It opens the door for a much more productive conversation.
Which brings us to another crucial element,
What's that?
sincerity.
Oh, sincerity.
All these techniques, all these principles,
Yeah,
they only work if you're genuine in your interactions.
absolutely.
It can't be just about getting what you want.
Right.
It has to come from a place of genuine care and respect for the other person.
Exactly. If it feels manipulative or insincere,
Yeah.
it will backfire. For sure.
That's why Carnegie emphasizes developing a genuine interest in others, truly caring about their thoughts and feelings.
It's about moving beyond those superficial interactions.
Right.
And building meaningful connections.
It's about recognizing the humanity in every person you meet
Yeah.
and treating them with kindness, respect, and understanding.
And when you approach relationships with that mindset,
Hmm.
it's amazing how much more influence you have
It really is.
and how much more fulfilling your interactions become.
We're seeing a theme emerge here.
Okay.
All these principles,
Yeah.
all these seemingly different techniques,
Right.
they really boil down to one thing:
What's that?
understanding and respecting the other person.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Carnegie's entire philosophy is built on this foundation of empathy.
And that's such a powerful message,
It is.
especially today, in a world that often feels divided and disconnected. The key to building bridges and influencing others lies in our ability to see the world through their eyes.
It's about recognizing that everyone, regardless of their background,
Right.
their beliefs or experiences,
Yeah.
wants to feel important, heard, and understood.
And when we tap into that shared humanity, that's when we can truly start to make a difference.
So true. So what are your thoughts so far? What's resonating with you?
I'm struck by how deeply insightful Carnegie's work is.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about surface level techniques to get people to do what you want.
Right.
It's about cultivating a genuine understanding of human nature.
Yeah.
And using that understanding to build stronger relationships and influence others in a positive way.
Yeah, it really goes beyond just the surface level techniques.
It does. And it's remarkable, that these principles are just as relevant today as they
Right.
were almost a century ago.
Totally. And you know what I appreciate is that he doesn't just tell you what to do.
Right.
He explains why it works.
Yeah.
Like he really digs into the psychology.
Of why people resist change,
Yeah.
why they hold on to their beliefs,
Right.
even when presented with evidence that contradicts them.
Yeah, it's about understanding the underlying motivations and fears
Right.
that drive behavior.
Exactly. And then he offers practical advice.
Okay.
for overcoming that resistance, like this idea of dramatizing your ideas.
Dramatizing.
And it's not about being over the top,
Right.
but about finding ways to make your message memorable and impactful.
I see.
And he uses the story of Charles Schwab and the steel mill to illustrate this.
Oh, yeah. How so?
So Schwab wanted to boost productivity,
Okay.
but instead of lecturing the workers,
Right.
he challenged them to a friendly competition.
Oh, interesting.
So he had the night shift write down their output on the factory floor
Okay.
in chalk.
Uh-huh.
And when the day shift arrived and saw the number,
Yeah.
they were determined to beat it.
Oh, I love that.
And they did.
Wow.
And it created this wave of enthusiasm and motivation
So smart.
throughout the mill.
Schwab understood the power of a challenge,
Right.
of tapping into that innate human desire to excel and to be recognized.
Yeah. And it's like turning work into a game,
Yeah.
right? And games are engaging.
Totally.
They're fun.
Way more fun than a lecture.
Exactly. It's a far more effective motivator than fear or pressure.
For sure. Speaking of motivation,
Okay?
I found Carnegie's thoughts on appealing to nobler motives really fascinating.
What does he say about that?
Well, it's about connecting your request to something bigger than yourself.
Oh, okay.
So instead of focusing on just what you need,
Right.
you show the other person how your request could benefit them, or maybe even a cause they believe in.
I see. So it's about appealing to their values.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And he uses the example of John D. Rockefeller Jr.,
Okay.
who wanted to prevent newspapers from publishing unflattering photos of his children.
Uh-huh.
And instead of threatening lawsuits,
Right.
he appealed to their sense of decency and responsibility.
Interesting. How did he do that?
Well, he said, you have children yourselves. It's not good for youngsters to get too much publicity.
And it worked.
It did. The publishers agreed to stop.
Wow.
Rockefeller understood that appealing to nobler motives
Right.
often achieves better results than using force or intimidation.
I mean, it shows that there's always room for empathy and understanding, even in disagreements.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes How to Win Friends and Influence People so timeless.
Yeah.
It's not about manipulation or tricks.
Right.
It's about building genuine connections, respecting others, and appealing to the best in people.
It's a guide to navigating human relationships with integrity and authenticity.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's a final thought for you to consider.
Okay, I'm listening.
Imagine everyone lived by these principles. How would our relationships be different?
It's interesting to think about.
How would businesses operate? What would society be like?
That's a powerful question to ponder.
It is a question worth considering, and maybe even more importantly, a challenge worth embracing.
I like that.
So go out there and make a difference, one genuine connection at a time. Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.